there's quite a lot we can cover separately, Patrick, but essentially we've got a community of people who are focused at asset management. So we've been doing a lot of work on trying to make sure that people have got a coordinated view of what asset management's needed. So I'll come on to that and explain that with you separately, if I may. But for this meeting, what we're looking at is how we can use 360 photography to actually address the fact that BIM models, for example, are very seldom actually completed. And so what we're doing here is making it so that we can hold we can take a BIM model. So here, for example, this is another university where the model was created, but our customer here was the asset management team, which was Sodexo, and they're doing the hard FM on this. And they might get a model, but the data itself isn't properly coordinated. So what we've done, we've connected, we've built APIs or connections into Revit, so that the information about a pump or a chiller or whatever is actually held in a database, not in the model itself. If the data is in the model, great, but we use a data connector to make that connection. So therefore, the information about the products are contained in a product library, which we make freely available. So the product library holds the information about the manufactured items. And the unique thing that we're doing, and this is the point about using 360s as part of the as-built, is that we can add a 360 photo. The FMs, for example, when before handover, they can go and take 360 photos, and that's now standard practice within Sodexo. So they take a 360 photo, and that connector there, back to that air handling unit, with the proper coding, has actually come through from the database. So this data here is all coming from a combination of what was in the BIM model and also what's coming through from the manufacturer. But the important thing here is that we're able to tag the 360 photo with what you can see. So this means that there's a lot of things that would never get modeled, but you need as an asset manager, that we're connecting in. So it means that you can literally go and see something that's there, and then simply connect it in. And then what we're then doing is then that can be used to verify what's been handed over. So in this case, we've got a schedule of all the equipment, both FF&E and maintained equipment, that's in a space, including who the manufacturer is. We've got it tied back to Uniclass and NRM and all those sorts of things. But from a simple point of view, what we're doing is making it so that you can then interact with the 360 photo, and you can say, I'm looking, say, for example, I'm checking to make sure that the speakers that I was expecting was going to be installed. Right. I can go to the database and say, I can see a 360 photo, there's a thing in there, and you see it's gone green. So that's auditing what's being handed over. Okay. And one of the big challenges that we've got at the moment, I think, is that there's difference in terminology. There's as-built. Nobody wants to tell you something's as-built now, apparently. So they're using the term as constructed, which that's the same thing, really. Also, then final construction. Now, that I think's moving away from something that's more evidence-based. And we're often finding people now saying for construction, which is, I think that's unacceptable. So what we want to be doing as asset managers is push back and say, no, we certainly want at least as constructed. Now,
Yes.
the fact that that may be difficult for certain parties to provide, like architects, for example, because at the end of the day, they're not responsible for, especially if they're not being commissioned to do
Yeah.
a final pass. But we need to recognise that that's the case. And what we've tried to do is focus in on certain key things. So, for example, the fire and emergency file requires you to identify where things are and the location of fire doors, closers, emergency lighting, etc. And that's now a legal requirement. And people should, not just on a new build, but on additional works that they're carrying out, even maintenance work, the person that's actually carried out the work needs to pass the information to the responsible person. And I don't know who that would be within UCL, but that may be, I don't know, it may be you. Somebody has got to take responsibility for whether the information that was handed over actually contains everything that they need. And also the contractor has got to declare that they've provided it. There's a lot of people in the industry don't realize this is the law. And what we're trying to do is make it simple to audit that. So here, for example, what we've done is said, right, these are the key asset types that are mentioned in the regulations. We need to know what the asset type name is. We need to know the individual reference of the asset, its location. If it's part of a system or a circuit, we want to know that as well. And then the manufacturer's details to make sure that all ties together with data sheets. And then the installer, the commissioner, whoever's inspected it and whoever's maintained it. So what we're trying to do here is come up with a standard methodology that then everybody knows where they're going with it. That doesn't mean, we're going to need a lot more information on certain types of assets. So on a fire door or something like that, you're going to want to know its fire rating. But we're trying to do this in a sort of a methodical way that is at least a baseline for people to work to. And then that means that you can say, well, this is what we're expecting at a bare minimum. If you give us more than that, that's fantastic. But at a bare minimum, that's what we're expecting. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does completely. Yeah.
And the other thing is putting this in some sort of context. So, for example, here, being able to say, we've got, certainly for existing information, we might have a BIM model, certainly we'll have CAD data, hopefully, drawings. Then one of the challenges is that all of this information needs to be pulled together so that we can then check it and audit it. And the way of doing that is if there is a model, then we can use it. But if people have just produced information in schedules, for example, technical submittals and things like that, that can then be added progressively. But the big thing is that for things that haven't been modeled, we can pick those up from 360 photographs and then be able to then manage that going forward. And we can also then use this to say, what's the critical information, like, for example, that damper in the wall. We want to make sure that if there's a scenario where there's a fire and it collapses, you need to have that, so it's got a breakaway joint so it doesn't pull it out the wall. Now,
Yes.
in many cases, as I understand it, the information that you get don't even tell you where the dampers are.
Yes.
So what we're trying to do is make it so that we can heighten people's awareness. So, we can run scenarios to say, okay, if fire breaks out in the kitchen, we need to prevent smoke from getting into that lobby area there, the stairs. We do that through compartmentation, and compartmentation is made up of a number of different asset types, each of which may be inspected, but all of them have got to work together as a system rather than looking at things individually. Because it may well be that somebody's done fire door surveys and work on your buildings, but that needs to be glued together. We're doing Greenwich University at the moment, where I think there's 52 buildings that we're creating a spatial model for each of the spaces so that we can locate where all the assets are. But what we've also been doing is they'll quite separately, a company called Golden Thread Fire Delay are doing the replacements of the inspecting the doors and doing repairs wherever necessary. And they're using a software application called OneTrace for that. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But the important thing is that the compartmentation needs to work. But if that doesn't work, then the smoke control, the detection system, and the signage become super critical. So being able to see all of those things easily and audit them, then we can get situations where, from a BIM model, say, we've got the information about that door and who the manufacturer is and the like. But the most important thing is to understand what that door's doing. What spaces is it protecting? Because as I understand it, that's what has a big impact on its risk. And then what we then want to make sure of is that if there's then other software applications being used by installers and inspectors, that it can all glue together. So this is one example that we've done recently, which is a college in Ireland. We're doing 6 of these colleges, and in this case, the model includes the fire dampers, and in this particular case, there's 15 different types of fire dampers. So we're connecting it back to the manufacturer's product details. But what we've also got are the documents about that particular asset, and we can produce a very simple 2D plan that makes it easy to see where everything is. So you can interact with that, and it's that particular asset. You can also see a schedule of all the fire dampers, all the dampers, and then there's a 360 photo which takes you to that particular item, which I'd be interested to see whether that sort of joined up process would be useful from your perspective, because what we're trying to do is just tie things together. Does that make sense?
So is that a question to me or a general question?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, to you.
To me. Certainly, yes, it would be extremely useful. The issue that we have, as Margaret may have alluded in previous conversations, is that we don't have a BIM model. I mean, existence at the UCL at this point in time. And it's also to get the buy-in with regards to the management of such a system, the cost, etc. But in terms of its concept, yeah, I fully understand and agree that this particular route would be very useful for us at UCL.
Yeah, the important message here, actually, that I thank you. I've just noticed that Weiwan and Cyprian have joined. So I apologise. I didn't see you at the beginning of this. When I was running through things with Patrick there, I didn't see that you joined. You may have seen some of those things this morning. So I apologise for repeating what you may have already seen. But the so just to answer that point, Patrick, is that um, the on existing buildings, very few of our clients have got models. So 90% of buildings, probably 98% of buildings don't have BIM models, and we don't need them. You don't need them for asset management. You don't need them to do what I was just showing you. As long as we can get 360 photos, and there's some very low cost ways of doing that, then that's the baseline to work from. So that's something that could be done quite easily. If there are BIM models, fantastic. If there's a business case for BIM models to be created, maybe when work is being carried out, additional works are being carried out, then that's brilliant. We can consume and use those. But where it's just a normal project where you've got buildings and you really want to be able to know how many assets you've got in there or tie them back to fire risk assessments and things like that, then that's a way of doing it. Could I just, oh, Margaret, carry on.
Yeah, just to, sorry, forgive me off camera, but just to reinforce, I think one of the earlier workshops you were highlighting this issue that, you know, uh, the the information we get, BIM models, as built and so on. Patrick knows the journey. We all know the journey. Trying to get the accurate information. In the end, it's taken up to 1 year. Patrick, you know, to get decent information, and then the BIM models should be used. We spend millions on the things. Then we'd park it. I know, as Patrick said, there are people who keep the model in, you know, on the server, and that's it. But it was intended to have it used. I mean, one BIM model came in, and the thing was upside down. The door references weren't in place. It was wrong, you know, referencing and so on. And it takes intelligent, you know, competent people who are in that field of endeavour to be involved. And obviously UCL now got staff involved who can do that, can help. But we should, as Barry was said, there is Barry, as was said earlier on in the other workshop, we have to use the things. Why did we create them if we're not using them? And there's one project that, as I mentioned before, we'll name nameless. Oh, UCL don't understand BIM, so we're not going to give them a model. But the designers utilize BIM in developing the design. So, well, if you've used it, we'll have it. But when we get it, what do we do with it? And eDocs is great, as you say, collects the information. eDocs is great, but using the information for the management of the building is the smart thing to do. And I know you've got good examples, Barry, and you've got good examples, George, and hopefully going forward, we'll all sing with the same hymn sheet. That's actually what we want to do with the information produced out of our projects. Sorry to go on, but it is a bit of a passion.
I I think the important thing to understand is what actually um, is being procured. So you might be asking as a client for a BIM model, and you might then say the level of detail that you're working to, and you may have a standard out the box set of parameters that you're asking for, but unless you as an organization are going to check what's being delivered, the likelihood is that people may not deliver it, because at the end of the day, what they've got to do is try and deliver what's needed for them to satisfy the contract. And in many cases, the way models are created is to make sure that they're producing the right drawings or schedules and the like. And therefore there's no way that you can assume that you're going to get the right information. It may well be that for all sorts of good contractual reasons, you don't even get the part of the model which actually defines the drawings that have been produced, because the drawings may not be something that people want to release. Hi, Paul.
Hi, George. Basically, you get what you ask for or don't ask for.
That's right.
So this is what the whole BIM protocols and all the rest of it is you need to be clear how you want the models. So it's things like you want the views, you want them audited. You don't want duplicate objects. You need the objects to comply with particular naming conventions. You need this data applied to things. All this is sort of all set out within the information requirements that the clients need to identify. And the trouble is they leave it to the so-called BIM experts who are working on behalf of the designers or the contractors, and they know nothing about this from an asset management point of view.
Exactly the point. I'm sorry. Exactly.
No, you're absolutely right. And the point, Andrew made a point earlier on the schools, that the department on that particular occasion, when he had the engagement with them, that it was clear they weren't even checking what they didn't really understand what they'd asked for, did they, Andrew? That was the point that you were making. Can't hear you, Andrew.
I'm sorry, I'm doing what's lovingly known as a Keith. I had my mic on top of my head, sorry. Yeah. Stupid boy. Yeah, no, it's exactly what's just been said. It's experts employed who say, look, we come up with a really clever idea, but that doesn't mean the client understands. And then it just bamboozles people trying to deliver the basics because they get lost in some of the complexity. So, for example, in this case, it was adding extra columns to I'm saying it carefully because I don't want to trigger Paul. Extra columns have been added to the Kobe worksheets, which you could argue is legal strictly, but is not very good practice. Well, is awful practice because there are other ways of doing what they were trying to achieve. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So I'm interested in understanding a little bit more about whether there are projects. Wei-Wan, what do you do? Would you explain what you do?
I work in an architectural practice, basically, mostly for housing. So this is all kind of new to me, really. But I know that there's been quite a lot of talk recently about asset management in the business itself, really. So this is something I'm quite new to and quite interested in.
What, within your own practice?
Yeah.
Oh, that's encouraging. Yeah. I mean, what we're trying to do is in housing, for example, it's unusual for models to be commissioned with the level of detail that's needed for asset management. What typically people are doing is layouts and things are even models. They're typical layouts of flats, rather than if you've got 200 apartments, you might have a model for each type of apartment, which in theory is good, but in practice from an asset management point of view is really challenging, because you don't know how everything's going to be put together. You might have handed spaces and things like that. Have you experienced that?
All the time. So this is obviously, I said we work with quite a lot of the housing associations, which I think they started to dabble into this world anyway, really. So we thought we'd try and get into the, a foothold into what they're wanting, really.
Okay, well, we also work with my other hat, which is the action plan hat. We work with housing associations, and also within BIM for Housing and BIM and Asset Management, we've got lots of housing associations. So perhaps what we should do is, if you want, maybe you and I have a one-to-one rather than bore everybody else with it. I can run through with you what our experiences of that so that you can perhaps draw on that. Would that be useful?
I think it would. I'm a little bit tied up for the next couple of weeks, but we should definitely touch base on this at some point. Yes.
Sure, absolutely. Good. Cyprian, what do you do? Cyprian, not there? Okay. Patrick, so could you explain a little bit more about what you do, and what are the issues that you're experiencing with not having the right information to what do you do, first of all?
Well, my title is known as the Transition Engineering Manager, and my role primarily is to review handover documentation that's produced by our capital projects, and transfer them over to the operational team so they can carry out the plan maintenance and operation of the systems that we've installed, which obviously includes a review of the health and safety file with Margaret, and the O&M file, or files that are produced for the various projects. And obviously you can see where this is probably going with regards to the issues I'll have is obviously receiving the information in a timely manner, receiving information at all, getting resolution of issues regarding information resolved in a timely manner. It's a whole host of issues which I think has been covered by our meeting yesterday, which unfortunately I couldn't come to. I was just writing a message in the chat to say that I'm going on annual leave, and it's 9:30 in the morning over here. So I'll be dropping off this call shortly because to attend to my holiday activities. But
thank you. Well, thank you for joining in. It shows Margaret's influence.
It does. This will be the first and last. I'll be attending any of these calls, but I thought it was quite useful to drop in at this point to make my comments known. So there are a vast array of issues that I think Margaret may have covered yesterday, but it is a challenge. Because I deal with all the projects that are over £2 million, and the people running these projects are UPOs, the university project officers, and the project managers are primarily architects. And because I'm from an M&E background, they rely on the contractors to give them the information regarding the M&E, and they just take on trust at the M&E that the information has been passed correctly from the contractors, because they're not really in a position to review it. And it sits with me to review, and I'm a party of one in my team. I'm supposed to have a team, but obviously for operation reasons, it's only down to me at the moment. So it's quite a challenge for me by myself to manage the review of all this information that comes in for these projects. So there's a whole myriad of issues that I have to wrestle with. But yeah, that's an internal UCL thing. But in terms of handover, I think it's a general thing with not getting information timely manner, etc. All the stuff that I probably previously just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, Barry's an expert in 360s and scanning and all of that type of thing. So in other words, creating practical asset information from nothing, really, starting off with some things, and then making one of the key things that he's doing is making things findable.
I think, yeah, my apologies for being late, but I'm just sitting here giggling to this because I'm late because a very well-known architectural practice rang me up just 5 minutes before the meeting to say that they have got a £3 million retention on them. And that's because they're working with a prison and they've given handover drawings, but HM Prison have gone, well, the first room they went into, some of the equipment was on the wrong side of the room. So they were panicking now because they've got to go back and redo all the as-built drawings. And there's a £3 million retention on this project until such time as the handover is done. And they were panicking because they're thinking, well, what can we do in order to scan every room? And there's over 200 rooms that they're going to, I'm not going to tell you what sort of rooms they are, but it's obvious if it's in a prison. Yeah, where things have been refurbished, new AC systems and all sorts of things have been put in, but they're not actually been installed as designed. And the prison authorities are going, well, we're not paying you until you give us actually updated drawings. So we're just going through a mad panic at the moment to figure out how they can get that data very quickly. Bear in mind that this place is now occupied. There's a massive security issue as well. So they're looking for the quickest way to go in and scan 360 what they do, because they've been told that they need to give it dimensionally accurate, and to a few 50 millimeters or so, 100 mil, but they need to actually draw in place what's done, and it wasn't built. So there's it's what we're talking about isn't just a would-like, it's a commercial reality to some of these contracts. I think in this case, some very diligent client rep has talked to HM Prison and said, well, I've just had a look at this drawing, it's wrong. So don't pay them the retention of the retention is £3 million for the OHM manual, in which the as-built drawings are included.
The odd thing about that is that the duty is dropped to the architect rather than the contractor, isn't it?
I don't know. I think in many cases, I think the contract will say that you're responsible for the drawings and as-built drawings. So it's up to you to modify. You're the custodian in the BEP plan. You're the custodian of the drawings. And if they're going to be modified, then that's up to you. The contractor may say that, and that might be part of the BEP, or it might be part of the contractual negotiations. But increasingly, what we're finding is that there are more and more asset owners employing client representatives who are starting to nail people down on this, which is really interesting, because they're saying, look, if an OHM manual, if that AC unit is on the wrong wall, well, the drawing's wrong. And so they're panicking now about how they're going to modify it, and what I can do or what they can do to go in and modify the drawings or check the validity of the drawings that they've issued. Some places might be perfectly fine, but HMP are going, no, until we've got a new, you're not getting the £3 million.
That's it.
Yeah. And and for the director of delivery for that construction company, that's going to go down really badly with his boss, because he should have been on top of that.
Exactly.
But you are getting now the client representatives are starting to go down on that, because they're looking at asset management and they're going, look, as part of the OHM manual, there's a retention on this until you deliver something that is functional which is great news for us and great news for the industry, because it implies that this is going to impact on safety, fire issues, Regulation 38, coming up with Martin's Law, but also just as basic fundamental. Have you built what you said you were going to build?
Yeah.
I mean, if there's a variation, that's fine. The client representative there is to adjudicate between variations of contract to make sure there's no claims either way.
Well, the interesting thing with that is that if the client's representative hadn't picked up on it, that could well have been passed on to the inherited by the FM contractor,
and thereby hangs the story of lots of these silos being built
And-
up, and the FM not being having a supervisory, or there's no governance on or checking as to whether the data was valid that was given to them.
That's exactly the point. So therefore, that first of all, it means that the FM contractor is probably inheriting a liability, and that liability, if it's a PPP, it could well hit them for 25 years.
Well,
And
that's true.
I
think
the fact it was handed over wrong isn't a defense, because they should have checked it. Sorry.
Yeah, no, but I think it's really interesting. There's a whole new job title coming up, which is a more enhanced client representative, who is over and above, probably not included in the BEP plan, but at least he's working to that, and then trying to justify. His job is to try and make sure that there are no claims for misinformation either way. So the contract is written in a form that, I mean, we all know contracts are written by construction lawyers to make things as vague as possible so they can put in a variety of claims on top of things. That's just the nature of the beast. But what clients are now doing is they're going, actually, we could use a client representative to manage that on a dynamic basis right the way through the project. There's no point doing it at the end of the project where the OHM manual's there. It should be done from day one, from the foundations upwards, from the concrete testing right the way through, and cables coming in and services coming in right the way till they put the roof on, or they hand over the key and make sure it's the right key, because that has happened. Someone's handed over the key and that keys didn't work.
Yeah.
Anyway, but no, I just think it's interesting, and it's sort of topical in that I'm literally fielding an inquiry about exactly what you're talking about, but it's a practical thing of a retention, and this client is refusing to pay until it's been fixed. The drawing is a true and accurate record. Who's gonna assess that? Well, I don't know about that. That's for the commercial people to figure out, but it's indicative, I think, of what is starting to happen in the industry, which is all good news for us. So.
Margaret.
Yeah, just to pick up on Barry, I'm so loving your discussion and your input and so on. The CDM Regulation 12, I don't know if you realise it, but the principal designer and principal contractor in law statute, if you read that guidance there, put in the chat, they plus all duty holders have duties to make sure in relation to the plan and the file, which includes as-built drawings, have a duty to make sure it's correct. In law, CDM Regulation 12. Now, that's why in Transport for London, before I was at University College London, I used to be Transport for London for 18 years. And right at the end, we used to do CDM and BIM together in one course because of the BEP and the health and safety file, or the BEP, and of course, which is supposed to respond to the employer's requirements, employer's information requirements in those days. Now, employer's requirements, there is a marry-in. There is a marry-in between the CDM, the BIM outputs, and of course the golden thread. Everything has to fit together, and that's why most organisations, where their employers' requirements, if it's not set out properly with what the client wants, they get what the designers decide. And as I said before, designers, contracts, people who put the contract together, they're the ones that decide. It's so wrong. They don't involve the users, the end users in that discussion, and they don't involve the asset managers and facilities managers. So that's where it's all gone wrong. And for my money, when we do, because myself and Patrick, we do the health and safety file with these client managers you're talking about. We do the health and safety file checks of all the projects. Oh, he does the O&Ms, I do the health and safety file. If the as-built's not right, it won't pass. But every designer should be asked to review the as-built, because that is their design. Yeah? The designer designed that element, whether it's M&E, structure, whatever it is, they should be asked, is this as built correct? In Transport for London, I have a number of designers say, the island is not in the right place. In my drawing, it should be over there. You've put it over there. Change the drawings. So the designers have got duties under CDM regulation 12, because that's all duty holders. So you've got teeth with the CDM regulations, as well as the BEP, obviously the ISO 19650 requirements, and of course now the golden thread. So we need training, we need raising awareness, we need education, and that's one of the reasons why we've got these workshops and other things coming up.
The regulation 12 that you just mentioned there, is that regulation 12 of building regs?
CDM.
CDM, just
the
different.
CDM regulations. Yeah, I put a screenshot in the chat. Yeah, so that you can understand. Paragraph. This is the guidance to the to regulation. It says paragraphs 111 to 115 explains under Appendix 3 and 4 the responsibilities of duty holders in relation to the health and safety file, health and safety plan, and what should be done with the information at the end of the project. It's not as detailed as we would like, and that's why BSA and the Golden Thread takes it further. I did a project for the Health and Safety Executive on the importance of the health and safety file, and it stops dead with the project. It doesn't continue in, even though it says, you know, the client shall keep it up to date. But which client does that? And going forward with the Golden Thread, which, as I said in the previous forum, UCL is adopting best practice for all projects, not just for HRBs. We want Golden Thread for all building projects. But yes, so CDM regulation 12, Appendix 4, Appendix 3 of the CDM regulations. You can take that to the bank.
Are they statutory, Margaret?
Of course, the CDM regulations, statutory requirement. Statutory requirement. Now, the guidance is guidance. Okay, so you've got to go to the appendix of the regulations, which is statute, and of course the guidance. If you don't do the guidance, you've got to do something better, haven't you? Yeah, you know how it works. If you don't follow the guidance, you've got to do something better.
Yeah.
Can't do anything less.
Is that right? Is that the way it works?
Absolutely. It's a shame it's not an approved code of practice, which has a higher legal status than guidance. You know, it's just the way the CDM 2015 ended up. CDM 2007 had an approved code of practice, had a higher level of legal standing than the guidance. But the guidance is guidance. It's like British standards. You know, if you don't follow the British standard, then you do better, don't you?
I don't know. I mean, the reason I'm sort of questioning that is that the logic of what you've said is sound, but where you've got people that are trying to, well, not necessarily
wriggle.
Yeah, maybe it may not be them that's trying to wriggle. It may be their cost managers or somebody else in the organisation that's saying, "Well, we've not done this before. Why do we need to do it now?"
Because you didn't understand.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah.
I mean, I was asked the other day by a tier 1 BIM manager who's trying to do the right job, but he said, "Where does it say in the regulations that we're supposed to produce an asset list at handover?"
Wow.
And I don't know where there is something that actually says that you've got to produce an asset list.
It won't be in the regulations, but it will be in your asset information requirements.
Well, no, not if they don't put it in.
If they don't put it in, that's the thing.
No, if they don't put it in, then they can do what they like.
Yes,
but it all comes down to the contract that is given to the supplier. I mean, it's what's built into the contract. If it's guidance, or if you make your EIR or AIR just like gives a list of the doors, then that's all they've got to do and comply with, unless they're abusing building regulations. So it comes down to the contract that the client gives.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's the nuts and the bolts of it.
Yeah.
The problem is, if you talk to some of the construction people, is that they would like to have really strong contracts, because then there's no wriggle room. They know exactly what's going to go.
Yeah.
The problem is most contracts are drafted so there's this obfuscation, and you can see it 2 or 3 ways.
Yeah.
You should say, we need an exhaustive AIR, EIR, and these are what we need, and that should come in the contract.
The problem with the problem with that, Barry, we've spent many years trying to get to this. The challenge is, and Paul would reinforce this, the difficulty is that you don't know what to ask for.
Oh, that's the whole point. Yeah.
No. So the point is, you don't know what to ask for because you don't know what's going to go in that building. So if you ask for,
I'm not sure I agree with that. If you're designing a hospital, you know what type of kit's going in there.
I'm talking about the client. I'm talking about the client.
Well, the client. I mean, the client should be the one who's. The client should be the one. If he's asking for a hospital or school, the client should be the one saying what is going to be built.
Yeah.
The client won't know what type of or what individual asset types would go into a ventilation system. They don't have the expertise to know that.
But they should engage with those that do.
Who do.
That's the issue.
That's the point.
They
and that's
should engage with the end users. Yes.
Yeah.
Help me out here, Paul.
Sorry, George, the problem is the way the main contractors are doing it is they're saying they want a list of all the asset types and the properties associated with them.
Yes.
What should happen is basically there and the specialist subcontractors are the ones defining the specific detailed asset types, etc. Basically, they should be providing information associated with any maintainable assets or asset that relates to other regulatory requirements. So, yeah, we shouldn't need to say that we have this asset type related to this unit class code with this IFC definition and these particular property sets, etc. The generic things they should just be providing.
I absolutely, but even rolling back from that, Paul, as you know, and I think Andrew would agree, when we've actually sat down with the FM experts, who they're the ones that are maintaining the building, and you ask them, what asset types would you expect to be delivered in this school or in this hospital or in this office? They don't know.
But they're not the people you want.
No.
It's the DLO. If you have a DLO, you have maintenance people in all our establishments.
Yeah, I'm talking about effectively the maintenance people, Margaret. The FM contractors are made up typically of people who have probably in some cases transitioned from so it'd be very interesting. I think this is what we're trying to do from BIM and asset management's perspective. We're trying to get to a situation where we can say that for certain types of buildings, this is a reasonable set of information or asset types. I mean, we've actually spent years developing the information asset types that we think are needed for residential, haven't we, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, so yesterday, George, I was on site.
Yeah.
I was told by the FM guys. So one of the things that I said when they were looking at delivering on this was they're not providing any information relating to valves.
Yeah.
And I thought valves would be a key thing that they should be providing asset information. Apparently, 2 guys the day before yesterday spent the whole day trying to find the valves to shut off one of the systems.
So we're right that they do need valves.
Yes, which was pretty obvious to us.
Yeah,
but they've now, the guys are they're absolutely fuming because they couldn't find, where the valves are.
Sure. So I'm agreeing with you, everybody, that this is something that ought to be in the contractual requirements. What I guess I'm saying is that for commercial teams who are trying to mitigate their risk of maybe a specialist supplier not providing all the information that's needed, they are going to be reluctant, and that's where we've got to hold their feet to the fire, I guess. They're going to be reluctant to actually put that into the contract.
This is also presuming the contract is actually drawn up with the person who's going to use the building or operate it.
Exactly.
So you take an easy example of retail, you build shells most of the time. You've got no idea who's going to occupy the space. You then, as the, say, the architects of that shell, you potentially normally hand that on to someone who's a specialist in doing the fit out. That fit out people then pass that on to the eventual tenant. M&S come along and say, yeah, we'll take that unit. That's 3 steps of, that's 3 degrees of separation already.
Most definitely.
But there are standards for these shelves, and those standards will be hopefully what is the basic information, isn't it, that you would use to create and provide that basic unit. And then obviously if somebody wants more than that, then that's it. But what I'm trying to understand is why clients do not engage sufficiently with those who are going to use the thing in order to, as far as you can, in order to deliver. When I first came to this organisation, project was delivered a list of 50 items at the handover that were not delivered because they didn't engage with the end users.
Yeah.
And says, well, basic rules of delivering a project, client brief. What does the client want? Engage with the client, engage with the users, design it, get it signed off, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and then into construction. So we've missed, it's already there, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it is. I mean, I'm reminded of a recent story which is local to me and very relevant, which is the Glasgow Children's Hospital, which was designed, but then a fatal flaw in the design was found, that the air exchange rate wasn't good enough to make it healthy, so it wasn't allowed to open. And then still in remedial works, at some point, someone was supposed to specify an air exchange rate, which is a critical parameter in hospital design. You have to have ventilation, otherwise you don't, then you get transmission of diseases and stuff, and especially in theatres and things. But because the air exchange rate volume wasn't met, the hospital was unusable, and it's still in litigation. And the problem there is who's responsible for it. It's because you've got there is an accountability, and if the designer has designed it wrong, then you've got a contractual, oh, you've done this wrong, so here's the penalty. And because this is in millions, this is a hospital which was going to be delayed for a year being open because some architect or HVAC person put in something that just wasn't up to the job. So you got, and that's just one. There's lots of other examples where that happens. Obviously not as dramatic as that, but it comes down to the clients not understanding what they should put in the contract. And then going with a consultancy company whose very job is to create more revenue, and not, if I'm not being unfair to consultants, probably, but consultancy is their job, and they get billed on the mitigation, the hours they put in to fix it.
Yeah.
Can I give you
another incentive? Yeah.
Can I give you another anecdote that's an interest similar to that? So John Lang was a big construction company.
It still is, isn't it? Yeah.
No, doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
The reason that Ray O'Rourke was able to buy it for £1, right, was because of 3 contracts that went wrong, and one of them was the National Physical Laboratory at Teddington. And they took on the contract. They won the contract, and NG Bailey was the M&E contractor, and they when they actually got into it, the AIRs had been written by the users, and the AIR was by scientists, and they put into the information, the performance requirements for the rooms, such a stringent level of air exchange or air tightness or whatever, that it was actually impossible to deliver.
Right.
But nobody had spotted that. And it cost John Lang millions, and delays and all the rest of it. And it was a perfect storm for them. They had 2 other projects that also went wrong. I don't know, Paul, if Mervyn's ever mentioned this, but
only a few times.
Three projects went wrong for them at the wrong time. The other was Cardiff Stadium, and I can't remember what the third was. But that one I thought was amazing, because for once they actually got input from the users, and it was so nobody checked what they'd asked.
But that's the thing. Nobody had checked because contractors are used to having the bland, flavorless contract documents, and then they work it out for themselves. So, it works on both sides, doesn't it? The client must be clear, must engage with the end users, must be absolutely clear what they want, and those that, and then on the contractor side, they should thoroughly understand the contract so that they can deliver it. And if they missed it, it was an awful shame. I know John Lang company. I used to work with them, days of Wimpy. But the thing is that it comes down to competence, doesn't it? On all fronts, people must be competent in what they're doing, whether they're designing or delivering, or even setting the contracts.
Good. Okay. Okay. I think everybody's having to disappear. Barry's just had to go. I think I found this useful. I hope you have, Margaret, and thank you for bringing Patrick in.
No, fantastic. I've sent him the next one as well. Hopefully, if he can join that. But there's another guy in the asset management team, David. Hopefully he can join. But this is so relevant, and so this is what we do day in, day out, and it's so refreshing to hear, industry people talking about it and saying that it's got to get better, and the golden thread must be for all buildings, not just for HRBs. Sorry.
But it can't get any worse.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew and Paul, could I have just 2 minutes with you when we finish? Because I've got some feedback I spoke to Tim this morning. Thank you, Richard and